Zoom recording. Give it just a second. Okay. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. We are excuse me. We are here for our Monday, February 26th iteration of the enabling ordinance ad hoc. We are here today. We had originally planned on continuing with 2.47, which are specifically the Inspector General sections relating to the enabling ordinance ad hoc. But we have decided to pivot. Well, commissioners have decided to pivot. What I would like to say is that we sent an email, I think, on Friday asking IG Phillips if she would be okay with maybe taking a pause on the public discussion of those particular items, because she has been asking for quite a long time about some discussions about what the structure of this all looks like between the commission, the IG, and to what extent, if any, there is supervision to have that discussion. And the commissioners and I on this particular ad hoc are going to try to get on the same page and with IG Phillips so that we can have more fruitful discussions about what the enabling ordinance ad section should look like. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to try to hash out a lot of these big picture items in these sessions unless we can actually get clear what it is that we think the structure is. So we're going to be doing additional work outside of these enabling ordinance ad hoc discussions to try to sort of to talk about it and to figure it out, and then come back to those 2.47 sections with a lot more ideas about what it should look like, and that will probably make the discussion around 2.47 a lot more straightforward, streamlined, and easier. What's also going to be helpful is that there's going to be a commission retreat on Sunday, and that will also give and sort of include a discussion about what this all is and what it's going to look like and what it should look like to inform some of those discussions. What that means for us is that today we're not going to take up 2.47. We're going to take up 2.45 instead, and to see how far we get. And if we have more of 2.45 to do the following week, we will do that as well as start to discuss some commission initiated or ad hoc initiated changes to the Oakland Municipal Code. And hopefully by then we'll have 2 weeks of discussions with the IG and be able to come back with a unified front of what we're doing for 2.47. If not, at least we'll be a little bit further along in the discussions. Questions, thoughts, comments?
If I may, Commissioner Shea.
Of course.
I just want to thank Commissioner Shea, Chair Peterson, and Vice Chair Ordinance for listening and allowing me to be heard and taking the opportunity. This is the first time that I really feel like there is going to be meaningful discussion and cooperation with both entities. So I just want to thank particularly Chair Peterson. I know her and I have had several discussions about this. So I just want to, in this forum, thank you all for giving me the opportunity so that we can really truly have a robust discussion between the body that oversees the OIG's office and then the OIG representative, myself.
Other thoughts, comments, questions? Thank you, IG.
You're quite welcome, IG. I think it's overdue, so this is good.
Okay. Well then, Why don't we get started? Thank you all. I think we're first meeting tomorrow, so we're not wasting any moments. We're not wasting any time. And that work will be going on in the background as we work on this work on this in this ad hoc. All right, turning to 2.45. We did start 2.45 at our first ad hoc meeting. We had gone through the definition section. I know that we had been able to highlight this ad hoc section, and I can't remember who gave us the information, but that per the city attorney's office, there was some sort of oversight, and this highlighted portion should still be in the definitions. But then we went through the other sets of definitions, and then we also, went through 2.45.020 and 2.45.025, had some discussion on 2.45.025 about how it was being moved to a later section that we'll see in a bit, and that the prohibition against this particular conflict of interest section is limited or restricted to attendance or being a participant in discipline committees. We went into, after that, some selection panel discussions, and specifically section G at the bottom of the page here. And we talked a little bit about what exactly the observation requirement is. We had 2 remote and 2 in-person. I think there was a discussion about submitting it at, I don't know how to say that word, a form where selection panel members attest that they have either attended or viewed these particular sessions. I think we saw some portion of that. Some of the selection panel members joined us this past Thursday. I don't think because of this. I think it's just they were in the building and ended earlier than we did. And then we talked about 2.45, or began to talk about 2.45040. Before we get back into it, is any part of those initial sections that anybody wants to return to before we begin? Okay. Talking about 2.45.040. Thank you. We started off some parts of this discussion. We started off on recognizing the need to true up or make consistent the phrase rules of procedure with our current rules of order. We need to figure that out. We also had a long discussion about section B, about how paragraph's a little awkward, probably use a little bit more clarification, and someone's going to need to do some offline work on this to try to clean that up. It might be me, we'll see. But let's keep going through 2.45040, starting with the B section. I think is probably the best way to go. Anything that anybody wants to bring up for the B section? Vice Chair?
Hello, everyone. Apologies for running a few minutes late. This is a section where I think would be helpful to have more clarity. So the one piece is official communications. What does official communications mean? Would be helpful to understand.
Whoever wants to jump in, IG.
And sorry, and the same with orders and directions. It would be helpful to clarify what that is referring to in particular. Yeah, those are my comments.
I'll,
Go.
sorry,
Yeah,
Commissioner Shea,
go for it,
I'll
go for
defer to any community members. Ms. Kathy, I see her hand is up first, so I definitely will defer to Ms. Kathy first, and then I can wait.
Thank you. I just have a quick comment that someone made at the last time that we talked about this section. And I think we were encouraged to look at measure S1. And there's some language that we can't direct the chief of police, or the commission can't. Does anybody remember that discussion? Thank you.
I do remember that discussion. And I do remember that the commission, and I think that that's kind of where this, and we could definitely shore this up a little bit, official communications, meaning, for example, when motions are given and directives are given at the police commission meeting, what does that look like? And I'll say this for me, as the IG, sometimes I'm looking at the meetings to try to ensure that the motions that have been moved and accepted at the police commission meetings are exactly what I'm writing, or the directive is clear. I've previously asked for follow-up for the motions and directives to be put in writing so that I can remember what it is. One thing that we've had to do in the OIG is go back and listen to the commission meeting and then like write down specifically what that is. So those types of kind of official communications, as well as Vice Chair, I know has asked about standard operating procedures, not only for myself, but also for CPRA. So yes, emotions are captured, but it's not verbatim. Like it's not transcribed. A lot of that information is summarized. And what I've realized is it's not written exactly how it is said at the commission meetings. So I know for me that that's been an issue. One, and then two, if there are requests for deliverables that aren't necessarily a directive, meaning, you know, can we ask the Inspector General to bring back a strategic plan next commission meeting? Definitely areas for improvement. Yes. So just kind of the cohesiveness in that versus, you know, one commissioner may ask for this, another commissioner may ask for that. Is there a way to officially say, okay, during the police commission meeting, Vice Chair Ordaz asked for this, Commissioner Shea asked for that, you know, these are boom, 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 and then given, because the meetings are not verbatim and transcribed verbatim, there may be some asks that are not documented that may be helpful. I know particularly for me because I like to be responsive. And then of course, the direction, you know, direct the Office of the Inspector General to do this audit or evaluation. What does that look like?
I see Vice Chair Ordaz's hand back up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think you're right. We need to do a better job at making sure that our action taken is clear in our minutes. I don't know if that can be addressed just by working closely or better with our chief of staff, or if that needs to be included in this document, in this ordinance. So that's a question that I have based on what I heard.
So I think what for me, the minutes is fine, but it's kind of like we have to go back and go and find the minutes. We have to wait for the minutes to be done. And there was a time frame where there was a lapse, minutes were backed up and things of that nature. So if there's a time sensitive directive, should that directive officially come from the chair of the police commission in an email? For example, Chair Peterson, after the motion for us, all three of us to provide input regarding the new laws that came in, Chair Peterson had wrote a email follow-up and then directives as to essentially the motion that was approved at the meeting prior. And I think that that was great. And to that point, yes, added to the rules of procedure. And I think that that is a great procedure to have. It shouldn't be spelled out in the ordinance, but to that point, it should kind of be spelled out, or some guidance should be provided in the rules of procedure supporters. Because I thought that that was fabulous. I had a document I could go back and keep looking at if I was interrupted, to ensure that all of the questions that were asked of the commission would be answered appropriately.
Thank you. So I hear about some some issues that come up that would kind of exemplify the need for adopting these policies that going around how they are communicated, what is in the communication, a time frame that they should be communicated in, and especially to not have our agency heads rely upon watching a 3-hour video to find the right language or waiting the 2 to 3 weeks for the minutes. I want to take us back to the, I appreciate that, and I want to take us back to the Vice Chair's question, which was there was a question about what the official communications and direction, what that pertains to. It sounds like it is things, or it sounds like when the commission as an entity is speaking to either the CPRA, the Inspector General, or the Police Department, or they are directing the CPRA or the Inspector General, the Police Department to do something. Is that what our collective understanding of this particular phrase is? And then to the extent that it is, do we need to clarify it anymore, or it's fine as it is? Vice Chair?
Makes sense. I would encourage us to define so that it doesn't leave room for interpretation, and then we're back to where we started. So if that is what we agree to, which is fine with me, we should be as specific as possible to not leave too much room for interpretation.
Do you have an opinion as to whether it's done in the ordinance or as part of the policies for official communications and direction, which would probably have another ad hoc with all stakeholders to have that discussion and inform us as to what that definition is?
I think it should be in the rules, mostly because if that needs to be amended, it'll be easier to do so than do a whole OMC update. That takes much more time and includes many other stakeholders. So I think adding it to the rules, one, creates uniformity, but also gives us the flexibility for the next commissioners if something is not working and they need to change it.
I see agreement in the chat from IG. Any other thoughts, questions, plus ones, differing opinions on that particular thought? I see plus one for Miss Leonard. Give it a moment. Okay. What about the second portion that you mentioned, Vice Chair? I want to make sure we make you whole about orders and or directions. Same thought, treat it differently. Thoughts?
Same thought.
Same thought and same sort of way to deal with it. Deal with it through policies that are created through an ad hoc process and eventually approved by the commission. That ad hoc having all relevant stakeholders to inform what exactly such orders and directions are. And okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give it a moment. People agree, disagree, same thing. Should this be treated differently? I'm going to take this particular pause time or empty time to make notes. Okay. All right. Hearing nothing else, I will take that silence to mean that there is not an additional thought, not necessarily assent, but nothing more on this particular point to discuss. Vice Chair, does that make you whole?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And is your hand a new hand or the same hand?
Old hand. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. When I catch a moment, what I will do is I will take a look at section B for our future meeting and see if there's any additional clarity that can be done to this section without losing its particular meaning, and then bring it back to y'all and see if we get any further with it. But in the meanwhile, anything further on section B? Ms. Leonard.
Yes, just and I'm sorry that I introduced a new topic when we were talking about official communications. I'm out of gas today. I just ate dinner. I haven't eaten lunch today, so I'm going to be on track here. Okay, so I'm going back to S1. Did we want to do anything about that with respect to this section? Were there changes to be made?
I see IG Phillips shaking her head no. My sense is that to the extent S1 does talk about a limitation of the commission with respect to the chief of police, that this may, well, help me out. Is there more to do? Let me just ask the group.
I would say that I think that Commissioner Shea maybe just put a pen in a note so that there's clarity in that, and then bring it back. And I don't have a problem with going back and taking a look, and maybe during our meeting tomorrow, I can discuss, or we can discuss a little bit. We can be prepared to discuss that at our next Monday meeting, if that's helpful.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, and I was just going to add that after we're done with each section, we should do a read for S1 alignment. So I think you're absolutely right, Kathy, and lifting that up. And I think we should do every section, every paragraph that we.
Okay. Anything else on subsection B? We can always turn back if need be. Why don't we move to subsection C? I'll leave all of 2.45 up so that we have the full context. Commission's rule of procedure shall provide a clear process for the commission by motion and a vote to schedule items or remove items from future commission agendas in accordance with applicable law. Motions and votes to schedule or remove open session items shall occur in open session, and votes and votes to schedule or remove closed session items shall occur in closed session. I saw Ms. Leonard's hand go up first.
So it says rules of procedure, but the commission doesn't have any rules of procedure right now. They have rules of order and codes of conduct. So I think we were talking about, oh, I see that up there. Okay. It's not on my sheet. Okay. I guess we've already kind of dealt with that. See where it says we need to clarify whether it's going to be rules of procedure or rules of order.
Thank you.
So right now there are no rules of procedure, basically. Thank you.
I am flagging this as another place where procedure shows up, and we need to true up whether it's going to be order or procedure. I do see some other hands. Michelle, I think your your hand went up in response. Is it for Ms. Leonard's point or something else? Okay.
I wanted to bring that up because I'm really curious. I don't think that they're interchangeable. From what I can recall from conversations, rules of order had to do with like the meeting and surrounding what that looks like. I think rules of procedure or policies has to kind of do with the governance of the interactions outside of the meeting. So how the body works, interacts, communicates with stakeholders and things of that nature outside of the meeting. From what I can recall having conversations about, and maybe we need to take a look at what the difference is between rules of procedure and rules of order, but I recall rules of order being surrounding how the meeting is handled via the chair, in the chair's absence, the vice chair. So kind of parliamentary procedures that align with the rules of order. I just want
Vice Chair, I'm trying to follow this thread on rules of procedure or rules of order. That's why I haven't sort of recognized you. Not that you need recognition, but let me just ask: is it on? Is your hand up for this point or something else?
Something else. Nope, no
Okay.
problem. I'll hold.
Okay, Ms. Leonard, this point, the rules of procedure versus order.
Right. So now that I have a question about the title itself. Does the commission have governing policies? So the title is Commission's Governing Policies and Rules of Order.
The commission currently has rules of order and of code of conduct.
Okay, so those are included as the policies then. So then maybe we need to, So you're going to create rules of procedure then?
No, I
Okay.
think, can I
That-
raise?
Because otherwise you don't have to have rules of procedure if rules of order and the code of conduct are considered policies. So
Sure.
rules of procedure, adding that "and" means you're going to create those, right?
Chair,
Or at least think about it.
I think Chair's hand went up on this point.
Yeah, I think that is perhaps the thing that we got hung up on before. We are structured in such a way that, you know, our direct reports, we quote unquote supervise direct reports. But the structure around that, what it looks like, the procedure, if you will, around that is something that we have never developed. And that's why we get hung up on words like oversight, supervision, direct. What do those procedures look like? So no, we do not have procedures. We have rules. And we need some procedures. I think that's what we're going to start flushing out, even if it means to go back a step or two from the beginning. Maybe we should have had a consultant to help us develop our structure and our procedures for how we interface and our oversight of our direct reports and other processes. So we kind of skipped a beat. I know CIPRA has just hired a consultant to support and provide direction on IAD coming over to CIPRA. And I know the OIG, in setting up her office, she had a consultant to help set that up. We've never had that in the commission. And I think that's why we're having these discussions, and they kind of go nowhere because we don't know what the structure or procedure should be, and they need to be built. Am I making any sense?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say that what this section and its changes seem to be doing is fleshing out what exactly those policies and rules of procedure are. So either, regardless of whatever the heading is, this particular section and its added portions do reflect a need for additional things, whether they're policies, rules of procedure, rules of order, whatever the heading may be. So there's definitely there. Okay.
May I speak on this piece?
Sure.
I think from what from what I read, this is reaction to what Tafara was doing when she was just making executive decisions to remove items that we were all requesting. So I think it's important to have this. I don't think it should live here. I think it should live in its procedure, and we should keep the OMC high level so that there is that flexibility to adjust the procedures as we start to practice them and implement them. So I think we should take this whole thing out and massage it and put it in the rules of procedures document itself that we will all agree to adhere to.
Oh, so we're talking generally about C, where we've moved on from this question of rules of procedure and rules of order. I'm taking Vice Chair's thread. And so we are discussing this particular rule, this particular section, section C, which describes a manner in which people can add, remove, or schedule items on a commission meeting. And Vice Chair, your point is that this particular section should be in a rule of procedure or rule of order. That this particular section is a reaction to a former chair and the control that a chair has over what the agenda is, about what's on it, what's off it, etc. And really a point, but that it should be in a rule of procedure rather than in the OMC. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. So again, I think for me, what I'm trying to bring to this conversation is, this commission in 10 years from now. How do we make sure that we don't, tie them to things that may or may not work? And by lifting it out of this document, which is much more complicated to amend, we leave them with that flexibility where, one, we don't miss this important paragraph, but it gives them flexibility to amend based on what's going on the ground. So yes, thank you.
Okay. I see hands up, and so I'll take them. I think Chair, is your hand up?
No, I'm gonna lower it, so, sorry.
Okay, Ms. Grenache.
Yeah, I want to respond to the Vice Chair's comment. I think if you delete it from the ordinance and you put it in rules for the purpose that you can amend it, then it kind of takes us back to square one where we were before, which is what we're trying to make sure doesn't happen again. So I'm not convinced that taking it out of the ordinance is protective enough of what I would consider a transparent process with respect to creating agendas that represent the consensus of the commissioners as opposed to certain priorities that the chair may have. So, there's a risk that if you take it out of the ordinance and you simply put it in your own rules, which you can all amend, then, there's no protection against going back to bad practice. So I would just wonder how other people feel about that. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Thank you. And I agree with what you're saying, Ms. Rashida, but I think you mentioned we're going to go back to where we were. I think the reason why we are here is because there isn't anything written. We haven't even created guardrails around this because, well, I don't want to speculate why, but I suspect there wasn't an issue until our last leader stepped up and she started to do what she did. So I disagree with your statement that by removing it here, placing it in the rules, we're going to go back to where we were. I think we're going to be in a better position. And in terms of for the process for amending the rules, it's not like, I could just go in there and write what I think and do what I want. There would be a process for amending the rules where obviously we would have an ad hoc and everybody would agree to adhere to the rules. So it wouldn't just be a unilateral decision, and we can make that clear in the document, how it will be amended and what will the expectations be. So that all that to say is that I agree that we should move it out of here, not lose it, but just move it out of this document.
Well, I think what, if I might, this is Chair, what had happened was, when you have a situation where you have 4 or 5 commissioners in agreement on something with the chair to the exclusion of, say, the minority, that's where this problem arose. So I think the best way to maybe protect that situation is to keep it maybe in the enabling ordinance, but we need to write some procedures, rules of procedure. And whether or not this will live in the rules of procedure or whether it will live in this enabling ordinance, maybe what we are trying to struggle with, what protects the commission against maybe undemocratic behavior where some things are concerned. So I don't know if it has to be an and or both and. Can it be here and also live in rules and procedures that we would have to write?
IG Phillips, IG Phillips, and then Vice Chair.
I could definitely defer to the vice chair if she wants to respond directly to the chair.
Yeah, well, I think that if we put it in here, this is, the final version of what we end up going with. So again, it just creates, I think, much more headaches for us. And I think we could address the issue in the rules of procedure, or whatever we end up drafting, wherever we land there.
IG.
So I think that this is general enough. If we look at the way that the enabling ordinance is structured, there's kind of a general, we must have this, but it must also include this. So for instance, I'll just talk about the IG section really quickly. The annual report. We must have an annual report. It must include these things, but it doesn't preclude me from providing additional things. This is a guardrail to what Vice Chair was saying, and Ms. Rashida. You must have a procedure that outlines the process for putting on items and removing items, because you could elect to put forth rules of procedure that does not have this. So this now binds the body to require them to have at least a section that has C in their rules of procedure, a section that has B in the rules of procedure. So I think it being the floor and not the ceiling just provides guidance to ensure that you all are thinking about what this looks like moving forward. And that's me on the outside looking in, because it doesn't specifically say you have to do it this way. It says you have to provide a clear process. And I think that that's where you flush out the detailed process in the policy or procedure, whatever you call it.
Vice Chair. That was kind of the thought that I had, because it doesn't say what those rules of procedure are, it doesn't say how many people are needed for that vote. It leaves open, and there would be, even with this first sentence, the requirement that those rules of procedure be written. Does that change how you feel or what you're saying?
I think it does. I'm fine with the first sentence. I think the second sentence is what, this work is already hard enough, and there's so many rules and so many things to know, and I just don't want to create a catch-up moment, or however you say it. I think we should provide the flexibility to create the process that makes the most sense for the body. So I'm okay with the first sentence. I think the details of the second one is where I think that should live in the procedure and not in this document.
I see. Okay. Thoughts on what Vice Chair has brought up about the second sentence, Chair?
You're on mute if you're speaking.
Yes, thank you. Will these motions and votes to schedule or remove open session items shall occur in open session? Is that requiring that we review the agenda and we have to vote to approve it, or we have to remove it? I mean, I've been in other organizations where you review an agenda and you move to approve it, or you move to remove something or not, or add something. So I don't find this a strange thing. I think one more step. Are we approving the agenda at the beginning of a meeting? Is this what this is? Yeah, and this brings up a Brown Act issue. Yeah, you can't add, and you can't remove. Maybe if you've already posted, can you add or remove at a meeting without a violation of the Brown Act? Is that what you're saying, Ms. Rashida?
Oh, there's
Yeah.
chat. There's chat going on. Sorry.
Yeah.
Vice Chair.
So much
Well,
anyway.
yeah, I think that's a good point, and we should clarify that. And again, I think we can do that in the actual document itself, get into the details of what this actually means, and check it, reference it with the Brown Act. But one thing that came up, for example, you know, Chair, you and I have conversations with all of our direct reports, various cadence, you know, weekly or bi-weekly. I think in those conversations, sometimes things come up of, you know, this needs to be scheduled, that is a priority, this changed. So we need to react to what we're hearing based on those conversations that not everyone is privy to.
Right.
So when that happens, you know, we're managing the agenda with Micah and having conversations with Twee and kind of doing that back end. So, well, if we make this, you know, final here, will it complicate or change that process? What extra step would we, or as the chair, whoever the chair is at the time, or vice chair, what extra steps do they need to do to move critical work forward, you know, in a way that's speedy and is responsive to all rules?
Mac, is your hand up on this point or a different point?
This point.
Okay. Please.
Hi, everyone. I realize I haven't spoken. I was on about half an hour, 35 minutes ago. Apologies for being a little late. Had an issue here in the office. On this note, I would just like to say where it says closed session items, votes to schedule or remove closed session items shall occur in closed session. Our agency needs to be able to have last minute decisions. I would strongly advocate for precisely what Vice Chair was stating, is that sometimes I need to reach out to the chair and the vice chair and say, we need this in closed session ASAP. And if I have to wait not just 2 weeks, but 2 weeks to schedule, or sometimes it'll be multiple weeks to schedule it in a closed session for the following meeting, the work of our agency will not proceed appropriately. So the more we can tighten those timelines, the better. And I'm especially for closed session, if there's any objection to something being added to the agenda, I would presume that could be discussed with chair, vice chair, or perhaps even in closed session.
Okay. Why don't I make an observation and then see what people think about it in this particular ad hoc? I see this particular section as as a reaction to what Vice Chair mentioned, where we have a situation where there is a chair and a vice chair who may either end up perhaps in the minority somehow, or perhaps disregard requests by other commissioners to add things onto an agenda. And it is a piece to protect whether it's a smaller faction or minority on the commission, or to safeguard against a chair or vice chair who kind of just acts on their own. But what I also sense is that this particular section is not the only way that items can get onto an agenda. This is just a way for perhaps commissioners who are not the chair or vice chair to have a procedure to get items onto an agenda in the future. I don't know if that's what was envisioned, but that's how I think about it. So I want to first gauge everyone's reaction to that. Like, is it true, or is the thought that if this section passes, that the chair and vice chair no longer have the power to control an agenda? I don't think someone help me with that thought.
That's how I'm reading it. But IG's hand is up, sorry.
No, your hand was up as well, Director Mayor. So I think to that point, and it goes back to speaking, because the bylaws have that, and every other commission, the chair tends to be able to do just that, have that ability. What happened kind of previously was there was an item for future agenda items, right? So during the procedural process, as you're crafting these, do you bake in? Do we vote as a slate? Say during that item, there are X amount of maybe 5 or 10 items maybe on there. Do you vote to say these will all go on future agenda items as directed, or at the liberty of the chair and vice chair, or just an acknowledgement, right? That we have requested that these items be put on a future agenda. To your point, Commissioner Shea, for the other members of the commission who wants to see certain things come about. Because before, I think maybe there wasn't really an acknowledgement. So an acknowledgement and vote, Chief of Staff, have we written all of these down? Okay, yes, they've been documented. We want to take a vote that we will take up all of these items on a future agenda as outlined and at the liberty of the chair, however that may be. But that's my long way of saying yes, Commissioner Shea. I read that as well. The detailed process would be fleshed out in a policy.
Okay. I am sensing at this point two interpretations of this particular section. One that is IG's, which is the rules are going to get figured out in this rules of procedure. But also I am hearing that there is another reading, at least, that says the chair and the vice chair no longer have the discretion to create the agendas at a moment's notice without a vote or a motion or some procedure that is set up in the rules of procedure. I think this particular point might be one of those that should be clarified and we should get that sorted out, what it is that we want to do, so that we don't have this ambiguity. Because I think that's possibly where some of where we may have a little bit of, I wouldn't call it tension, but hesitancy about this section, maybe. Chair?
Did I hear IG say, though, that this may be more appropriate if we're thinking about how to fix this particular sentence? This should be a vote for future agenda items, like at the end, we create this list, and maybe there are 4 items. We need to invite this person or that person or have a presentation on the other. And we just say, we raise up these four, all in favor, aye, all of, but I don't know what to say about remove closed session items. A vote to do that. But the one on future items, I could see where this could apply to future items. That we take up that issue at the very end of the meeting. And we vote in open session on what items should be taken up. Because the vice chair is really correct. We're meeting all week outside of the regular meetings with various direct reports, various people. And we're developing agenda. We work on it on Monday with the chief of staff. We work on it with council, and then we post it. And so what happens if we're going to allow this to mean that commissioners can then vote at the meeting that we've posted to remove items, that's a hazard. That is a lot of work. It's all, and I agree with the vice chair, it's already a lot of work. So we need to really look at this carefully.
Let me start off by addressing this particular point, which is I think there was a discussion in the chat about how it would be a Brown Act violation for people to try to add things onto the agenda at the beginning of a meeting and then have that approved and then added to the agenda. So my sense is that this particular provision generally seems to describe future agenda items and a motion to vote for future agenda items to be on there. I take that partially because I saw Commission Council chime in on that particular part after Ms. Grenage brought it up first.
Yeah,
And
I
so
think it's future.
And so to the extent that on this particular issue, I think what's envisioned and what will likely be spelled out in a rules of procedure is that during that time, as suggested by the IG, during the future agenda items section, there will be a discussion about what future agenda items there are, and if need be, a motion and vote to have those items on a particular agenda. And then exactly what the parameters of that and the procedures of that is something to be hashed out in the rules of procedure. I'm seeing nods, but I want to hopefully get back to this point about whether there needs to be something in this particular section to preserve what you've described, Chair, the sort of the ability of a chair and a vice chair to have flexibility in creating the agenda, seeing as how y'all are working every day, almost every day, and sort of putting things on. And so agency heads can also bring issues up at a moment's notice, but not really a moment's notice, but within Brown Act moment's notice to have things on the agenda. Vice Chair.
Thank you for your summary observations, and I wanted to ask a clarifying question. Did you mean to say that in an open meeting, commissioners would vote to schedule agenda items? So for example, there's a macro, everyone wants to hear a macro presentation and they want to hear it on the meeting, on the specific meeting of March 29th. Is that what you're saying this would allow for?
That is my sense, with the caveat that the rules of procedure would likely note what format, how far in advance, whether a particular date can be assigned or scheduled, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, that is the thought.
So if there is an emergency, we need to shift the focus of the agenda. Will this allow for that?
I don't know, and the answer to that might be in those rules of procedure that are drafted. it would depend on what's written into the rules of procedure, because this section is not about the rules of about what goes into those rules of procedure, but just that you need rules of procedure, I think. I see lots of hands going. Must have said something. I must have said something wrong. Ms. Grenache?
No, you didn't say anything wrong, but thank you. A couple of things. First of all, I put in the chat that at the beginning of the commission's existence, there was a pending list that was in every agenda that was created. So as people made suggestions during commission meetings, it was a pending list that contained all of these proposed items for future meetings. And there was also a kind of like a spreadsheet which allowed commissioners to indicate degrees of priority that would be assigned to each one. So that might have to do with levels of urgency based on the nature of the item. And for example, budget items might have some urgency based on deadlines and that kind of thing. So that's one item I think that that should be considered in terms of the kind of flexibility that you're looking for. As far as the other issues of removing items and adding items and that kind of thing, the Brown Act allows for certain flexibility. If there's an emergency that comes up that you didn't have time to notice properly, but you need to put it on that agenda, which happens quite a bit at the city council, like grant deadlines and things like that. There are, under the Brown Act, there are provisions to add something at the last minute. And that would certainly include what Director Muir was talking about in terms of some urgency that develops because a deadline is coming up and action has to be taken. So it just requires an emergency finding, and then you can go ahead and add things at the last minute. You can also remove items on an agenda. For example, when the city attorney didn't show up, even though they were on the agenda, you remove that item, simply you table it, you defer to another date, but the public still has the ability to comment on it because it's on the agenda. So all of this has to do with the Brown Act. And I think that you can get guidance from your legal counsel. And I think that you have a lot more flexibility than you may realize in this discussion. Thank you.
Just to add to that, I think that the flexibility that we're thinking about might be, on the one hand, emergency, adding things on in an emergency or needing a short-term turnaround. But the other part of it might also be situations where we might have too much on the plate and need to make space for things that are coming up that we don't know about, and just wanted to recognize that, which again is something that would go into, I think, a rules of procedure as we sort that out. Mac. Sorry, Director. Here.
Oh, good. Thank you. So I just want to make clear, having heard you break it down and IG explain the thinking behind this, that we would still retain the ability to request, say, to the chair and the vice chair, when the agenda is being drafted, if it were in the procedures, we would retain the ability to say, get a call, hey, do you have anything for the agenda? Okay. And then it's published, say, later that day. Because especially for closed session items, so long as there's no need for a vote on future closed session items, that works great for me. And I'm hearing from IG, if it were in the procedures, we would be fine with that. Am I correct?
So if I may, I think to everyone's point and Director Muir, completely understanding the deadlines that come up, that you all come up against, 3304, and potentially needing to stand up a discipline committee. I think it may just be helpful to suggest that we have a line in here that says something along the lines of in emergency situations, the chair has the sole authority or discretion to add an agenda item, understanding an emergency finding is needed. To Ms. Rashida's point, I think that that might help everyone, and then flushing out what that looks like in the policies and procedures, I think would make sense. Just that's my suggestion, and I put it in the chat as well. Understanding what the needs of CPRA and their reliance upon making sure that the commission has the ability to move quickly.
Sorry, so I get that and I understand that, but I just want to clarify. Like I think there was one aspect of the discussion where the chair and the vice chair have the ability to set and create the agenda as a regular matter of course. What I think you're describing is a different situation where in emergencies, then they would have the authority to add that on. But if they have the ability to set the agenda as a matter of course, do they need the emergency exception?
I think to Ms. Rashida's point, it doesn't hurt. It is in alignment with the Brown Act. I don't think it hurts. In my opinion, whether we want it or don't want it, I feel like it might put folks at ease.
Okay, Chair, sorry, Director Muir.
And there's also the sunshine ordinance, a little bit more restrictive on there. As long as the chair and vice chair can still have the authority within the Brown Act and the sunshine ordinance, which is already exist, I'm fine. There just are, yeah, that's what it comes down to for our agency. And I don't think we need to speak to it in this provision per se, so long as they could without a vote. And it's particularly for closed session items where I can understand for open session items, having a public vote, there's transparency built into that. The nature of the closed session items may not be able to speak to at any juncture what was spoken about in that setting.
But I think I don't ever raise my hand. Sorry, guys.
Just go for it. You're good.
Oh, I guess I just want to not lose the thread and for everyone to understand what goes into developing an agenda. And it's not it's not necessarily as easy as you might think, or maybe you do understand there's some complexity and it's arduous. So again, if this is meant, and maybe it's just too ambiguous and it's too vague. If this is meant to say that when we are at a meeting with an agenda that has been posted, commissioners can vote to remove items by a majority. I don't know. I don't know if I can live with that, guys.
Let's I don't think that battle is for this ad hoc.
Okay.
I don't think that battle is for this ad hoc. Let me start off by saying that.
Okay.
But I'm not trying to kick the can down the road. And this particular provision just seems to say that there needs to be rules of procedure around these particular items, specifically about scheduling or removing items from future commission agendas, from future agenda items. I am going to probably work on an additional sentence about the chair and the vice chair's ability to set the agenda as well as the emergency exceptions. I'll work on that. I think that at the very least should be, I am worried that the absence of it from this particular section is an indication that they don't have that power, even if the Brown Act and the Sunshine Ordinance may have it. I will double check that as well, just to be certain. Yes, and IG Phillips did tell us that she needed to step away for a little bit around this time. Okay. We're going to work more on this section or figure this section C out more. It sounds like we're good on the first sentence that is there. We need to add an additional sentence, and then we have questions about these latter two sentences, the second sentence, of whether what it's in there and what the parameters are. We'll bring this back as we work through it. Other thoughts on this section, section C?
We spent a nice bit of time on it, so let's keep it moving.
Okay, sounds good. Section D. Section D is also a new section. This stating that commissioners are public officials, are required to conduct themselves with highest integrity and leadership in all. Guessing that's just actions, not inactions. This includes conducting themselves appropriately in interactions with the public, fellow members of the commission, and with all city employees, shall act in accordance with all applicable laws and policies, including policies and all rules and procedures. Complaints that a commissioner has failed to abide, there's a word missing there, abide by any of the same will be assessed and investigated as appropriate by an independent investigator, such as the city's Office of Employment Investigations and Civil Rights Compliance, or the Public Ethics Commission. A finding that a commissioner has violated an applicable law, rule, or policy may result in reprimand, suspension, or removal by the city council. I will ignore the need or lack thereof of the Oxford comma for now. Ms. Leonard.
Thank you. I'm wondering if that word should be interactions, because on the I'm looking at the second line, highest integrity and leadership in all interactions, because then the next sentence uses the word interactions. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out there.
Thoughts?
But I'm thinking they should both be interactions.
Maybe it could be
Because
both.
the second sentence is referring back to the first.
And
right?
the third one refers back to the first as well, right? Shall act.
Where's the third one?
So I wonder if it's actions and interactions. I don't know if that sounds weird.
So in terms of the grammar, integrity and leadership, those are things that sometimes involve interactions, sometimes involve actions. Might be both, as Vice Chair said.
Okay, yeah, I'm just pointing it out, you know, because I wasn't sure.
Director Muir.
I think if it's actions, interactions fall within actions. And then acting in accordance with all applicable laws and policies fall within actions. So I think if you just leave it as actions, the logic will flow throughout, but points taken if we want to add more.
All right. Sorry, making this work. All right, so you said that it's actions is broader, essentially. Okay. Other thoughts? Okay.
I like it, and I think we could consider in the rules of procedure being more specific about what's allowed and what's not allowed. I mean, I think this one is critically important for everyone to engage with integrity in everything that we do as we do this work. Thanks.
This is another place where procedure shows up. Because there is a code of conduct reference in the rules of order, so we should probably figure that out. I think there were some notes on this, right? What are people's thoughts about the inclusion of the Office of Employment Investigations and Civil Rights Compliance? I guess that's the question, right? For those of us, for those city employees that are with us today. Sorry, Max, that's just you right now. To the extent that an outside person, a non-city employee, interacts with a city employee in a way that the city employee might make a complaint about, is that something that the Employment Investigations and Civil Rights Compliance Department investigates?
I don't know the work of the EICRC very well. IG's here. I know the Public Ethics Commission approach.
I can go ahead and chime in, Commissioner Shea, if that's okay.
Yep.
I think the issue is that there needs to be language in here, in the ordinance that gives them the ability to do so. Even though commissioners are not city employees, they have a supervisory, managerial, direct report relationship with employees of the city. And these investigations are protections for the employee of the city. So even though a finding, say that there is a finding, similar to the Public Ethics Commission, what's written down here is that finding would then go to the city council to take into consideration those reports, whatever the case may be. And then whatever procedure city council has to hear, discipline, remove, should they feel the need to do so, they have that report or that justification, versus the city paying an outside independent investigative firm or whatever the case may be. There are the Public Ethics Commission that has investigative authority, and then the Office of Civil Rights also. So that was the thinking around that.
Sure. My question is, if it's not a city employee, or sorry, if it's between a non-city employee and a city employee, where the city employee makes a complaint or someone makes this complaint for the city employee, does EICRC still investigate?
This would give them the ability to do so. So the way that this works is that the police commission, outside of the Public Ethics Commission, who is staff, and it's that relationship is very clear. The Public Ethics Commission's relationship with the executive director of the Public Ethics Commission, where it was unclear because the language in this document was kind of problematic. This now gives them the authority. So generally speaking, no, but this language would provide a mechanism for, say, if I had a complaint and I felt as though my civil rights were being violated, to provide that authority for that agency to investigate my complaint of civil rights violations. Does that make sense? Generally speaking, no, because 95% of the majority of city employees report to the city administrator, who is a city employee.
I think for me it's a conceptual issue as opposed to what it is here, but I will take your word for it. It's just, my thought is that an internal office like that office investigates employees, not non-employees. But if this is a legal mechanism or a hook for them to be able to, then that's what it is. Okay. Oh, sorry, Director Muir.
Yeah, and to clarify, I didn't know that office by the title is written there. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I would also just say, as opposed to such as the city's Office of Employment Investigations, I would put including but not limited to. I think reserving the ability to hire an outside investigator may be appropriate. But empowering those two entities to see that they can jump in as appropriate makes a lot of sense.
IG Phillips, your example was about the Public Ethics Commission, right? So that was where this section needed to be for the Public Ethics Commission to investigate. Did I hear you right or wrong?
Sorry, that was just an example. I wasn't
Okay.
necessarily speaking specifically to that language. When we were trying to talk about the jurisdiction of civil rights over non-city employees, I was just giving the example of the Public Ethics Commission's relationship with the Public Ethics Commission Executive Director, not the Public Ethics Commission's ability to investigate, but that should be in this section.
Okay. A thought came to my mind, and I'm sorry to do this, but sometimes I play devil's advocate. In a complete, because it's still around that conceptual issue of the city investigating a non-city employee, where this is a little different because we are constantly working with city employees as commissioners. But I can think of a situation where an ordinance is written that might open up non-city employees to such investigations. Well, I guess it wouldn't matter to just any member of the public, but I guess it wouldn't matter because what power does the city council have to sanction or discipline any member of the public as opposed to members of boards and commissioners?
Correct.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you for entertaining me for that. Ms. Grenache had a point about whether Measure S1 speaks to this particular issue. And there's something about the Public Ethics Commission, but I can't remember what. So I will make a note to come back to this and look into that. Director Muir, still your same hand or different hand?
Yeah, and just to note, I'm looking at a few other policies. For example, AI 71, the anti-discrimination and non-harassment policy, includes unpaid interns and volunteers. So there are certain applicable policies, and weaving it into this is consistent with that.
I'm not gonna raise my hand because I'm driving. I'm sorry, but to Director Muir's point, I think that there was some language also maybe later on in the ordinance that specifically says, I think that commissioners must have training or must be given information regarding AI 71 and all of those other trainings as workplace retaliation and things of that nature to that point, because the commission does have the power to oversee direct reports, given them the information and avenue to ensure that these policies are not violated, because the city still has the obligation to protect their employees. Director Mayor and myself, that if the commissioners may not be city employees. I just 2 cents, 3 cents.
We're working our way towards that section. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, questions on section D? Eventually, I'm going to get this all into a Word document and be able to make edits one day. I'll get on it soon. Okay. Section E, just generally changes. It takes out the word bylaws and says amendments to the commission's governing policies and rules of procedure. And broadly talks about providing employee unions with notice of proposed changes to these amendments. I think it's just a language change without any substantive change, but any thoughts or comments on this section?
Oh,
Question.
sorry, thank you. Is referring to 1021? Union 1021? Or which union is this referring to? So is this referring to R3? Go ahead.
I have no idea. Applicable unions?
Yep. Because local, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Muir, and I know that you're adding more staff. I have 2 unions that are represented in my office. So I would assume Local 21, SEIU, and CMDA.
Way too complicated. Who has the time? No, I'm not in support of this. Does this imply that we need to meet and confer with the union? Because that's a whole process in itself, and as volunteers, I don't think that's appropriate.
This is not a new section. This is an old section, which is already in the municipal code. Which means
Okay, well, is there an opportunity to delete it?
I think that's what we're gonna I will make a note here. And we will have that discussion once we get through 2.45. Or do you want to have that discussion now?
Well, since here, I think it's appropriate to talk about it, but I defer to you, Mr. Chair.
I'm just a lowly volunteer. Let's go where this ad hoc would like to go. Let's talk about it. Sorry, Director Muir, your hand's still up?
I will note, because Section E begins with "to the extent required by law," it adds no greater burden than what the existing law offers. So although this is just saying, if there is a law that says you must meet and confer, you must meet and confer. But so I don't know that it necessarily adds more bureaucracy than would just be the legal requirement. Otherwise, yeah, I would flag it if it was framed differently, but just want to highlight that caveat really creates a safety net for the meaning of the rest.
I will also see that this particular section seems to require the city to act as opposed to commissioners. It seems to say the city will provide the employee unions with notice of such proposed amendments. I don't know if that affects things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just an extra step, but if it's on the city, will that be the city attorney's office or the city administrator's office? And what is the procedure that we would have to build in for that to happen?
Can I jump in real quick?
Please.
Sorry. So usually employee-employer relations is the point of contact for the unions. And I think, to Director Muir's point, if we're talking about the direct reports, we are not unionized. We are unrepresented. However, if there is directives that will include in the policies or procedures that the commission develops to communicate, direct, request certain things from your project manager to position classification, which is your chief of staff, that is a union position. So I think taking that into consideration would be helpful. Maybe discussing this information with employee-employer relations, and I would be happy to provide you with the email information for those individuals. That's who my office has gone through, and I'm assuming Director Muir and PRA as well.
Vice Chair?
That's helpful, and that makes sense. I was not thinking about a chief of staff. So that's 2 staff people that fall under our supervision. I think for me, my 2 cents, and I'll leave it here, defer to you all on how you want to proceed, is that this is already so much work, and adding all these layers, while I understand it's important to have those guardrails, we either need to think about an executive director who actually does this and has the time and gets paid to do all of this and coordination, even if we as a commission are not the ones meeting with the unions, we still need to be in communication and support and bring, especially if it's the leadership, the chair or the vice chair leading that work. So I think that's just too much work. We don't have the time, or we don't get paid for it. And I just think we should remove it, since we also have an opportunity to streamline our work to be more effective. Thank you.
Are there other thoughts on either what the vice chair said or on section E in general?
So one thing I will say quickly is that City of Oakland is a union town, and there are requirements when it comes to overseeing and supervising unionized employees. So if the commission is going to continue, and in no way I'm saying like you shouldn't have this particular authority or not, but if that authority is there, then there are certain processes that must be followed because of the protections that are embedded in a City of Oakland employees' employment status. So this is definitely a commission conversation. I really don't have one way or another. I'm not union. But I think you guys may have to discuss this a little bit more offline. Just a suggestion.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I don't know whether we're gonna get to clarity on that piece in this call. I recognize it's already 8 o'clock. But I think for me, this conversation also gets us back to the point of directing, right? We're expected to supervise, but we're not expected to direct. Those two things are in conflict, in my opinion. And I know we've kind of flushed some of those things out with some of the things that we've agreed to thus far, but that pressure point is still going to be there. And I'm lifting it up as it's coming up as we're having this dialogue.
Commissioner Shea, if I can jump in, I don't want it to be a back and forth with myself and the vice chair.
It's okay if it is.
Yeah,
But
that's what this is for.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything that precludes the commission from directing. I think the boundaries and the guardrails are to ensure that the directives are in alignment with an agency's authority and jurisdiction, the authority of the commission and jurisdiction to provide that directive, and to ensure that the commission as a body is okay with that directive. I don't believe that there's any changes in here that precludes or takes away the commission's ability to vote to direct. I'll just speak for the IG's office, direct the IG to produce something or to do a task that is within their jurisdiction to do. And if I'm wrong, please direct me to that section and I can review it.
Director Muir.
I agree. I think that when it comes to the supervision, I suspect the IG is also reminded from time to time by folks within the city. We don't report to any one commissioner. We report to the commission, and thus requiring those votes to really make clear that we are being supervised or overseen, which my choice word, by the commission as a whole. And creating any safeguards for the idea that we would be responding really essentially to one commissioner over the other, and that the body is what reigns supreme.
My sense of this section is I'm going to speak specifically from the commission perspective. We hired a chief of staff for a particular job duties, qualifications, and specific things that they're asked to do. And if if all of a sudden we come up with policies and rules of procedure that ask them to do something outside of that particular classification or additional things, or that they might need notice of that, and that the city would provide that, and then we would probably have to go back. We may have to go to the drawing board if we need to go back to those policies or rules of procedure. That's my sense. I'm feeling like the discussion is turning into something else. Director Muir.
Just on that point, the onus of Section E is on the city, and there are processes for employee unions to be notified. And just for that, let's imagine that the chief of staff felt that they were working out of their job specs. They would notify their union and perhaps file a complaint against me, who is their legal supervisor, and there wouldn't be that exact dialogue. So just to be clear, there would be some sort of grievance, whether that was formal or informal, and then there would be if the bylaws had changed, the structure of the city has employee relations working with their legal supervisor, who is the agency director in this situation. So I do want to stress, I don't see this actually creating more burden on the commission. As if the commission changed its bylaws, it would be up to me to either to negotiate with the union to amend the specs for that position, or have further dialogue with the commission as a whole.
What I'm sensing is both that yes, there is employee relations, but I'll just make a hypothetical. When we do this, when we make these governing policies and rules of procedure, especially since they talk about things like setting agendas, our chief of staff is going to be involved, because the chief of staff is very much involved in writing and preparing and setting up these agendas and changing them when needed to be changed. Those policies and rules of procedure may make it so we may spend weeks, months, whatever it might be, to create those policies and rules of procedure, and then have it approved by the commission, and then that, whether it's prior to approval, after approval, I'm not quite sure, might need to go to employee relations, and these employee unions may need notice of those particular changes. There may be a meeting confer that I don't know if we're going to be involved. We might be. That's an additional administrative load that I think the vice chair is talking about. And then when it comes back from that particular meeting, that might generate more things to do, or more changes to be made, or to reconsider, right? So there is this back and forth, and I recognize that the vice chair's concern about this administrative load that is on everyone here, about the work that is being done and wanting to make sure we continue moving forward. This is something that does come up pretty often when we're working on police policy. We send it off after commission approval, and all of a sudden it comes back after a meeting confirmed. We have to approve additional changes. So I think, where vice chair is coming from. And or just to say, I acknowledge, I acknowledge it. That's the sense that I'm getting. Director Muir?
I think when it comes to meet and confer, this section would certainly not be the thing to trigger that. And it's about changing the material conditions of somebody's work environment, or the real substance of their work. And I don't think that this section is going to impact that necessarily, right? If you're supervising unionized employees and you change their work conditions to a certain threshold, there may be a need for meet and confer, but there are legal triggers that are outside of this ordinance. So I think that my question too is this: it says the employee unions, not entirely clear on which we are referring to, and it doesn't even say the impacted employee unions. So again, the onus falling on the city. I think if the city is providing the notice, then the city, including perhaps myself or other agency directors, are the ones taking the lift on the administrative lift that we're describing.
Can I jump in really quickly?
Of course.
I think that the heavy lift, unfortunately, this iteration of the commission is taking on because policies were not created previously. So I either, I think the chair had said something about this earlier, having a consultant come in and kind of help to craft and be that mechanism may be helpful. But once there is something in place, and I say this because I crafted the policies for the OIG, kind of any small tweaks that is germane to the changes, to Director Muir's point, in the work of an individual. For example, when I created the first SOPs for the OIG, we didn't have a job spec for our policy analyst. So I'm going back because I added that, and then I've met with the union and said, hey, this is it, and provided them the job spec for the policy analyst so they can see that it is aligned. It'll be a heavy lift on the front end, but after that, I think it would be smooth sailing. But if we're talking about things that govern the commission's actions and authorities that don't impact the unionized employee, that is something that Director Muir, I think, is speaking about. So it's not this and that. It can also be this or that. Director Muir may have the opportunity, once he finalizes his procedures, to build in what that communication is for the police commission's chief of staff, given that he is the supervisor for that individual. It could be baked into his standard operating procedures. And then that communication from the commission to him, and this is me, I'm speaking, that is definitely not my lane, but given the fact that the charter does say that individual reports legally to him, we have to be a little sensitive and mindful of that as well as you guys have these discussions.
Chair of us, I think you might be the most well-versed in labor relations. Thoughts?
In terms of, we're talking about E still?
We are.
Yeah. I think that we have to recognize, I think that we do have individuals that are city employees and subject to bargaining agreements. And if it says to the city will provide, I don't know what that means. We're supposed to contact the city and the city will do this for us? Or what?
My sense of the workflow is that there would be an ad hoc to work on the policies, rules, and procedure, that at some point that ad hoc would present to the full commission, and the commission would approve those, or right before approval, we would send it off to the city for their sign off on it. And that might be that point or not. The workflow is, I think, up for definition, right? Oh, I guess such proposed amendments, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, that we would propose them and send them to the city, and the city would interface with the employee union.
So it's an additional step prior to policy implementation for the commission.
Yeah.
Director Muir?
So
oh, sorry. Please.
Sure that would impact commission workload necessarily. Other than we do our work completed and it's another box to check, like you said.
Director Muir?
I would recommend adding impacted employee unions and then probably consulting with the city attorney's office, if not commission counsel, where there is the definition of impact, but I think there's a lot of work where there is no impact to unionized employees when it comes to, say, the bylaws or amendments to the commission's governing policies that would forego some of this concern.
Well, presently, don't we only have one employee that's under a union contract, or position, I should say, that is under a union contract?
I would argue that an attorney for the police union might say that this could broadly impact, that the commission's bylaws in some circumstances could impact conditions for officers. And so that's where I would hone in on what impact
I see.
is, or for example, part of the ordinance, if I remember correctly, has the commissioners, as it presently stands, the commissioners deciding who works at a second location for the CPRA. These are things that come to mind, although for officers, I think there might be a broader position taken by their union.
Or if we ask the city administrator to have someone at our meetings,
Yes.
potentially, or liaisons in particular.
Mhm.
Lots of different iterations of how these policies and rules of procedure could be written and to whom they may affect. Additional thoughts on section E. I was inaccurate in thinking that this would be a rather minor thing. Apologies.
Well, I think what IG said, this is a union town. SEIU is very protective of their employees, and the police association is very protective of their employees. And if this is a required step, even though, well, if this is a required step, it's just a required step to make sure we are not stepping on any union rights. And it might be as minor as a meeting discussion as opposed to a meeting confer. So
it does seem to just lay out or reiterate that to the extent required by law, notice will be given.
yeah.
Let me just take a look at how long. Let me just take a look at how this sex. Why don't we get to 2.45.045 and then start thinking, or the next few sections, and then think about wrapping up. 2.45.045 discusses the confidentiality of personnel information. The only change seems to be changing department sworn employee to officer in line with the definition changes up above. Any thoughts, comments, or suggestions on this particular section? Okay. 2.45.0. I see a chat box. Makes sense. Okay. 2.45.050 talks about the designation of alternates as voting members. That can consistent with 604D3, the chair of the commission may, in their discretion, designate an alternate as a temporary voting member to establish a quorum. I think this is cleanup language and gender neutral. I do think that it perhaps there might be a, sorry, Chair.
With the use of the word "there," chair of the commission may in their commission
yeah.
is a gender clarification.
Yep. Question as to whether it needs to specify if the chair is absent, or the chair or the vice chair.
Oh my God, because we can't say chair or the chair's designee, so it has to be chair or vice chair. I can't imagine a meeting where the chair and vice chair are absent, but I guess it could occur.
So let me think about this from a procedural aspect because the charter also just says chairperson. If the chair is absent and the vice chair is present, do they become the chair of the meeting? Is that how that works?
Procedure.
Yes,
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you.
And
Okay.
sorry, and if anybody has any questions, I think that that could be fleshed out in the policies, but yes.
Okay. And then to the extent that neither the chair nor the vice chair are there, and someone just takes the reins, whoever that person is that person the chair of the meeting? I think we're all thinking yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just making
But
sure.
how do we determine though who that next person in succession is?
So I think, and I'm gonna just jump in again because I'm driving, but I do have my kids, so she said hi, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to the Bay.
um, that's something that maybe we can flesh out, because if the chair or vice chair absent, emergency circumstances are not there, it would probably be already scheduled. So then putting in there the next seniored commissioner
Oh.
Or
in the
tenure.
bylaws.
Yeah, next tenure, senior or tenure, yeah. Yeah,
Okay. So I'm hearing consensus that all of these iterations of what happens when the chair is not there can be fleshed out in the bylaws, the rules of procedure, or the policies, whatever it is that we're discussing, and the section in and of itself is that we have here on the screen is good. Okay. Oh, I think we can get through this next one. 2.45.60 background checks. That seems to add in, nope, just makes it, just cleans up the language so it's not a one-item list, and then cleans up the appointing authority language. I think that's what it does. Thoughts, comments, questions? 2.45.0.60.
Commissioner Shea, I know I take over meetings. I'm sorry, but I want to say this because another commissioner had brought this up to me who is not on the ad hoc. The frequency, I think the reappointments of commissioners and them having to go back through the background check again. That is a city procedure. I know when I had a temporary employee who then applied to be a permanent employee, they had to go through the background check again because a year had passed. And I just want to put that out there for anybody who may potentially have questions, other commissioners who are not a part of this conversation, that's something that's on the city side and not necessarily something that I think that we can deviate from.
Let's see. Background check shall be performed with the mayor's final candidates for the position. Background check shall be required for all commissioners, shall not be performed by the department. Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking through the sections to verify. I see 604 C1 is the section that requires background checks for all commissioners. This section seems to flesh it out, stating that background check shall be for any of the candidates prior to the names being submitted to the city council for confirmation. Retained independent contractor. It seems like it would require commissioners to undergo this background check each time that they do come up for appointment, whether it is renewed appointment or by the whether it's a renewed appointment or a new appointment, but not necessarily if they get elevated from alternate to commissioner through the commission processes. Okay. Miss Leonard.
Yes, I just wanted to add a word on the second line. Final candidates for the position of commissioner and alternate commissioner.
Additional word there. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the context. Thank you for the catch. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments on background check section?
Mm-mm.
More, less, more extensive, annual? Okay. All right. Well, the next section is a rather large section, 2.45.070. We've got 4 minutes left. I am happy to suggest that we start this section anew for our March 4th meeting.
I move that we start this section at our March 4th meeting.
Hearing no objection and seeing a second in the chat, thank you for your time and your thoughts this evening. We will take this up again on March 4th, and we will begin with 2.45.070 functions and duties of the commission.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, everyone on the call, on the Zoom.
Thank
Have
you
a good-
all.
Thank you
Have a
very
good-
much.
Have a good evening.
Have a great
Good
one.
evening. Bye-bye.